Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns, the 2020 Mastery Mission, for this bonus recording with Bernd. Bernd, in your initial session with us, you spoke about how you go about identifying whether a first person on the ground is in fact for you and some of the challenges and some of the realities of that. But in this session, we've asked you to talk about your personal experiences of choosing Lacework in particular, and also, you know, that whole process, and really just take us on that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to talk to quite a few companies and try to qualify opportunities for myself and for the companies from both sides. So the way that I looked at Lacework initially, I obviously had worked with some of the people at the company in previous engagements. So through that, I knew the company and kind of knew what they were doing, but not in a way where I would constantly get updates or anything like it. So I was pretty far from it, but just looked from a distance, like this looks interesting, looks like an interesting company overall, but never planned to do anything towards going there. So had basically conversations with the investors a while back before I actually chose this opportunity, or the opportunity chose me, whichever way you want to talk about it, and try to understand it from that perspective. At that time, I wasn't ready to make any changes, but I did know that probably some kind of funding round would come up, which then obviously did. I never thought it would be in the realms of those 525 million that happened at the time that I was joining, and then another funding round of the 1.3 billion, which is crazy in any positive way. But at that point, like, this obviously validated a few things for me in terms of being able to execute. And when I then thought about this opportunity, the one thing that really, really pulled me and that I found interesting was I could build from the beginning. And I knew about myself by that time that I enjoy building, and it has to be something that I find topically interesting. And it has to be something that has the potential in region to be large, massive in a quick way. Not because I have to have such a big team and this and that, but because I knew consciously that I would love to build a market that I really understand, meaning Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Eastern Europe, like those regions that I've been in before, not necessarily at this point in my career, a whole EMEA role building UK or any market that I just haven't been in. So I wanted to qualify what the possibilities are to grow that market in a certain amount of time, meaning what headcount are we allocating, what are we focusing on in what time frame, also what's the hiring plan in terms of the productivity roadmap, understanding how many people can and do I have to hire next month, and when do they have to start, and does the company understand how long it takes to hire certain people in certain regions, and just have upfront conversations about that. But really, it came down to also the people, making sure that the people I would be working with initially in Europe are people that I can build trust with and that I can learn from. Like, egoistically, I wanted to make sure that I get into a setup where I develop and get better at what I think I need to get better at, and what I don't know that I need to get better at, but will identify through the process. And that's become very, very, very clear in the interview process with the people that I interacted with. I probably, in the end, made my decision in about a week or two, between re-engaging with the company after I had few investors conversations beforehand, a longer time ago, and the actual clicking through or signing the offer letter. And in that time frame, I had multiple discussions every day. So just making sure that I condense the amount of information that I can get in a very short time frame from different people in the business that I could speak to, and also from some people that I've worked with in the past. So I could get just really different perspective from a technical side, but also from a business side. And another thing that I believe we talked about earlier is making sure that you do your homework and you leverage people in your network and get other opinions. And I think a while back I heard Carlos talk about who he talked about before he joined Mongo at the time. And for me, like, it was key to actually go to some CISOs that I used to work with in the past. Thankfully, at Cyber Reason, I sold to a similar I sold to similar personas in some companies. So through that, I was able to talk to former champions of ours and have a very straightforward conversation to try to understand what their perspective is on the company and on the space, specifically the different use cases, how Lacework sees the world and whether that's relevant to them. And if not, how it can become relevant and whether this is an opportunity where you're going to go around and explain to people that the cow is pink while they look at the cow from the other side and it's green actually the whole time, and you're going to have to say, no, it's pink, I'm telling you. And this takes 12 months until they actually jump above the other side of the cow and look at it and realize, yeah, you're right, or I can see it the way that you see it from your perspective, because that again is going to make champion building and closing those first logos so much harder, and then the whole thing doesn't work if you don't find first customers.
That's incredible. And I think obviously one of the big things that you did cover, you know, one of the first points that you covered in the last session was obviously choosing a subject that you enjoy, right? Obviously cyberism was cybersecurity. You're now still in that cybersecurity market. Is this a subject that's interesting you, and what is it that was so interesting about Lacework?
Yeah, good question. So initially, way back, I always thought like I don't ever want to sell security solutions because I'm gonna have to scare people and tell them what wrong things could happen and this and that, and then kind of sell them a plaster, which I don't really enjoy. That's not a process of selling that I like, to scare people and then say, hey, and I have something for you, I can help you. I realized then when qualifying Cybereason as an opportunity that that's not really how you sell this, and that you do it a whole lot differently, and that actually aligns with my value system. And intellectually, I find cybersecurity a topic that interests me. Like, you learn stuff about how companies, nation states are hacked and what actually happens there. And for me, initially, this was like a whole new thing I didn't know all that much about, but I could get interested in. And you just learn things that you never had exposure to. That's pretty tied to everyday life. Everything really is hackable, from your phone to your laptop to, I don't know, street cameras to everything. And if you're good as an attacker, you can do a lot of things that you and me just wouldn't know, specifically not when you haven't looked into the topic. Then if you zone out though, it's great that I find it interesting. But when you think about what's really driving the economy right now and where are people spending money, two megatrends right now are cloud and cybersecurity. And what Lacework does really well, it plays into both of those megatrends and does this with a product that really works and drives value really, really quickly. So when a new CISO comes aboard, or a new CTO, somebody responsible for cybersecurity in the organization, and he joins a company, there's 20 things they could be doing. Like, if you look at the cybersecurity market, it's so dispersed. There's so many different companies that do certain things fairly well, but oftentimes it comes down to, so what can I do that has a really quick impact between when I start this project and when there's results that my board understand, that have to pay for it at some point, and have to allocate certain amounts of budget to solutions that will be bought, and needing to make sure that the person making that decision and asking for that money doesn't act or feel like they just want another toy to play with for the team, but it actually drives business value. So back to my point, I think that cyber is a topic that's obviously by now in the news every day. There's a lot of pain and urgency in the market. It's not really solved in a way where you can just throw more people at the problem to get stuff done. And with cloud coming into it, it's even more so. Things change every day, up, down, left, right. It's great in terms of innovation and getting things done, but you have to somehow secure that as well. And that just is an immense challenge that basically Lacework has a great solution to. So that was the reason really for staying in that space, or evolving from really an endpoint security space, which at the time was exactly the thing that I wanted to be in. The EDR space was a great place to be. By now, basically, moving on to the cloud is exactly where you'd want to be in terms of the things that happen in the market and the levers that you can pull.
Amazing. At what point you know, within having started at Lacework, was the validation point for you that you had made the right decision, and what was it that really kind of validated that decision for you?
Probably the first customers that we won. So started initially and took some time to understand what we do properly. Like I said before, make sure you understand the details. And I started recruiting immediately, so I needed to make sure that basically I find champions and potential candidates that want to build with us and buy into what we're trying to do here, which is build from nothing, which is not that easy to do. But then in terms of validation, the first few customers that commit to you, the first few partners that want to work with you, and then being able to build bigger deals, to actually realize that the impact of what you've sold a customer drives tangible value in that customer setup, staying close there and understanding what they do with it. And then through our customer success teams, making sure that they actually map back to the value that we initially decided we would drive in terms of a business case and all of that, and then come back to that a little bit later in the customer interaction through having actually generated certain value. So let's say the customer success team is engaged. Once they've taken over from the sales team, they speak to the customer and talk to them about the 1-2 things they would like to achieve in a certain time frame based on what's been discussed in the pre-sales phase. And then we actually go and execute on them and then come back to those results. For me, when you actually see this, stories just get so much better because it's your own reality and it's not something that you've learned from customers in California that I'm very thankful for and that are great, but it's just a little bit different when you tell a German how a Californian company has done something versus when it actually happened in region. So I think that was the tipping point. And right now, I get up in the morning and every day is enjoyable. It's hard work, but every day is very, very enjoyable. And I had a conversation with a candidate a few days ago, and he basically framed it in, at a former company, it felt like he was a football player, that he could just do what he loves all day long. And he didn't even realize how great the product was because it was flowing and it was just so much fun. And I feel that way right now with the team that we have in region and globally. And it's just a great place to be, truly and honestly.
But you talk a lot in your reference in your previous session. You spoke about the importance of having a plan, and once you're in, the plan perhaps needs to change. So, how did the plan change from what you thought it was going to be, and why was it important for you to make those changes once you actually landed under the desk?
Yeah, I think one thing that iterated, like there are so many things to do at once. Recruiting quite a big team in a short amount of time, as you know, takes time and focus. And during that, making sure that that you actually sell the first customers, like that prioritization of where you spend how much time, probably needed the most adjustment to make sure that there's clear processes in place in terms of how do we run the recruiting piece. And by that I mean, how does every day look like? Not that I would make big plans and write exactly what I do in every hour, but for example, a sync call with the recruiter every morning for 30 minutes to make sure that you have this topic covered, you know what you need to get done, and then you can use parts of the day obviously to do some proactive recruiting and then go into actually finding champions and partners and end customers. And then when people join your team, making sure they ramp, making sure they understand what they need to do and getting them productive so you have more time to spend on further building out the team. That probably needed time adjustment in terms of what I thought beforehand, just in terms of the amount of roles that we wanted to fill in a short amount of time frame.
Yeah, so I suppose, again, just going through the mindset part of that, because obviously we spoke a bit about the needing to adapt. So just talk to us about, what you were experiencing in that and how you were able to tune your mindset to be able to deal with that kind of the change.
I think it's really around getting one thing done at a time while having 15 balls up in the air and enjoying that and knowing that you enjoy that. Like I've always been a way that if I was the global account director for one big account, I don't think I would thrive in that role. Not that it's any better or worse, it's just a very different setup typically that you're in. And so I like having different things happening in parallel and being able to pivot from certain topics to one another. But I think it requires constant refocusing on what's really important on that day to drive certain results that people expect from you, and adjusting constantly. And I think that's the mindset that you need to get used to. And you either are like that already, and I'd say I had a basis of it, but through experiencing certain real situations, you can talk a lot about how you think you are and how you're wired, but when you're in pressure situations, then you feel how it really is and how you're going to adjust to it. And for me, obviously, we had a little bit of change here and there with people. We're growing massively from 200 to 1,000 people in a year. That's just drastic. In a positive way, it felt like dog years. But with that, just things change every day. And I think it matters to focus on the 1, 2 things that need to get done in that day to drive the business forward in whatever area has that focus. And then every week's going to be very, very different from one another.
And do you order any of those things that have got to be done in any particular order? Obviously, we've spoken to, talked about the 3 R's: recruitment, retention, revenue, as top 3 lines. Is there a thing that you focus on when you're prioritizing those tasks?
Well, in this specific situation, again, we're tasked to hire quite fast and a lot. So that definitely took focus and time, because we couldn't scale in the way that we're trying to do this if we don't have the people and if we don't have them in time for the productivity model to work out. Because in the end, like it's a model that has to work out, that ties to the numbers that we want to get to. And that certainly had priority. With that, initially, like I said before, I needed to understand the solution and make sure that I have something to talk about, because otherwise everything else doesn't work. I cannot recruit anybody if I don't understand what we're selling and why it's relevant to customers. So they're not going to buy it. If they do, they're probably not the right people, because they don't ask deep enough questions and don't challenge me enough to really find out whether I know my stuff, whether they can learn through the interaction, and whether they can qualify whether this really sells, whether it actually works. If I don't know how it sells or how the value is driven in customers' environments, then why should people care or even join us for the mission that we're trying to do? And so that was really important in the beginning. Same thing for customer partner engagements. If you don't know what can potentially drive value in those customer situations, what use cases, what are the competitors, what do the competitors do well, why are you better than them? All of those things, not necessarily in a level of depth of a technical person from 1 to 10 and you go down to level 9, but make sure you understand the first 3, 4 levels really well without having to have technical people in every conversation, because that just doesn't scale. Maybe you have one technical person in the beginning, and I was lucky to actually have a technical expert with me when I joined already. He was already here and he came from a competitor and really taught me everything. So I was extremely thankful to have somebody in my region that really got it. And that definitely helped me scale. But if that's not there, go and find that information and get really good at that before you do everything external at a scale where you realize it's not working. I'm not hiring because people are not buying from me. I'm not selling because the message that I'm trying to send doesn't have any value or depth.
When people join your team, Bernd, what is the thing that they most need to adjust to? What I suppose is the biggest adjustment that they need to understand when they're part of this team?
That's a great question. And people tell me this, whether I ask them or not. After a while, they come and reflect on it and give that feedback. And the thing that's constantly mentioned is the speed. Things are happening in a very short time frame. We have a lot of things to get used to, not in a way where we shove it down your throat, but in a way where there's so much information that's accessible to you on every level, including technical information, competitive information, but also tooling in order to make sure you prepare your account decks in a way that you focus on the right accounts, you understand the demand, are people interacting with us? I don't know, there's probably 20 different tools that you could spend your time with in the beginning, and people are coming in and they're like this is so much. And usually people give positive feedback about the way that the team interacts with one another and the way the team locally supports one another. So we hire to strengths. We try to identify what people's superpower is and what they're really good at. And then we encourage for that to be shared between the team very much. And this is easily said and a lot harder to do in a virtual world, or at least in one that's mostly virtual still in the last few months. And I think we've done well in making sure that this knowledge that we've built in the last year and a half in region is transferred really quickly to the newbies. So for that means even more information in a short time frame, because when they come in the beginning, by now they probably have 19, 20 other sales reps to go to and other people in the different business units that have certain things and do them really well. And they're going to be pushed in a way to go and pull that information to use it for their benefit. So the result of that is they're learning really quickly. The feedback is 9 out of 10 times, hey Bernd, like in the last such and such weeks, I've learned a lot, which is the core thing I care about. Like if I go anywhere, if I'm not learning, I'm probably in the wrong place. So I'm really happy to hear that. And then it's a great bunch of people. I enjoy spending time with them. They're really helpful. They help me develop and they help me learn stuff, which I think it's really about. And with that, the results come.
From the hires that perhaps didn't go so well, the people that maybe came in that didn't work out, what did you kind of learn from those about what it takes to really thrive and survive in, a high growth, high demanding, high excellence organization like Lacework?
Yeah, I think you have to really, coming back to our earlier point, qualify really, really deeply mutually why somebody wants to do that, and really being honest to yourself, like trying to find it as a hiring manager, and get deep and understand what drives people and why they are the way they are. Some of that is potentially somewhere in their childhood or how they grew up, and why are things the way they are, and why do they really want to do this role, and then just be very, very transparent about what it really is like. And you're probably not going to describe it exactly in the way that it is 6 or 12 months later, because you don't know. You haven't been through exactly the same thing and you're learning yourself. So you do your best job of describing how it is and how you think it'll be. And then I think one thing that's important is to make sure that you see the parallels between what people have been through in the past, what companies they've worked for, and at what stage did they do exactly what. So by that, I mean, obviously, if you've worked for Cisco, SAP, or IBM, it's different than working for Lacework. That's probably clear to everyone. But also, if you've worked in a subsidiary that's been acquired by a bigger company, and you were really in that subsidiary only, but you always had access to customers of that big company, and you could basically use that to do pipeline generation, or the speed would just be so different in terms of ownership. Here, I think you really need to get used to you own it. And that doesn't mean that there's a gun on you and you have to do it all yourself at all. But you own your territory as a CEO of your territory and everything that's relevant for that. And we're going to help you to do it. And management should be very, very involved in that in a positive way, helping people to get to where they need to get to. But in the end, I think people are not used to that level of ownership. And just to be really, really clear, that doesn't necessarily come with a QBR setting where you feel like you're fully under the gun and you're going to be yelled at and this and that. We have a very transparent culture, a very direct, straight on the chin. I like to make sure that people know where they stand both ways, but it can be done in a way where people don't feel like they need to go to the bathroom afterwards. And it can be in a positive way where people are developing, but there has to be friction. You don't learn if everything just flows. And if things don't work, you have to talk about them early so that we can try to turn it around jointly. And really, like, I own it as much as a candidate owns it, or anyone in the team. Like, if something doesn't work, I messed up because it was my hire. And in the end, it's going to cost me big time if we make a decision that something doesn't work out. So again, like, let's make sure both sides really do their homework and are very, very honest. I think those are the the two core things: honest to you, but also honest to themselves about what they really want and why they want something.
Amazing. I think this is a perfect place to kind of conclude what's been an amazing session. Bernd, just want to say a massive thank you to you. Really sharing your journey and your story, and thank you so much for taking us through that.
Thanks so much. It was really enjoyable to talk to you guys, and look forward to further interaction. Thank you. Great session.
Definitely. And again, Bernd, obviously, I've watched it from the very beginning. We're fortunate to work with you, and, you are building one of the most incredible teams. You're on an amazing journey. As I said, I'm really enjoying what you're creating. And I think that from the regions, people better watch out, but huge amount to learn from you, Bernd. So thanks ever so much for sharing that with us all. But again, to all of our listeners, we hope you really enjoyed this session. If you've liked what you've heard, please do like, share, and subscribe. But a big thank you again to you, Bernd, for joining us today. And we look forward to welcoming you back for another mastery session soon. Thank you.